Vincent's story is so miraculous, man. This guy, he has Down syndrome. He knows everything about every wrestler, about like an encyclopedia. And his sister was roofied with fentanyl on a date. She was drugged on a date, and she had like an aneurysm and had brain damage and became paralyzed. And so Vincent wrote a letter to the foundation asking if he could do a wrestling match to raise $1 million to buy a house. Like, bro, these people are the nicest people. And you look at them and how they think, and you're like, why are we not more like this? He wanted to make a house for his sister to have wheelchair access.
Welcome back, friends. Today I drove across the state to Ringgold, Wisconsin to sit down with a singer-songwriter whose cover of the iconic Cranberries song Zombie went double platinum. He gave away all the money it's ever made, though. He's been praised for his work as a sobriety coach, for his campaign to raise money for Down syndrome awareness. He's been an advocate for mental health awareness and much more. Welcome to the show, Tommy Vext.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, thank you for having me. This is a unique spot to do an interview. I've never been somewhere where there's like a chalkboard behind us.
Oh, so the venue that we're at used to be a school. So I guess they converted it. I don't know when. I got a little bit of a history of the tour of the building earlier, and a woman who I can't remember her name, she passed away, had like created this venue. And yeah, it's a lot of history. Machine Head's played here. There's like, I mean, if you walk through the hallway, all of my friends' bands have played here. You're like Brett Michaels is right on the wall. Yeah. Not that I'm friends with him, but there's like, Non-Point and El Nino and,
People I'm surprised came here. So, I mean, this is just one part of a tour. So I guess, what are you on right now? You're on a tour of how many cities? How did this one pop into place?
Oh, we're doing 23 shows, I think, in 30 days. So it's a pretty loaded tour. And then my agent convinced me to go back out on the road, and I was like, okay, cool. So
yeah, because this is your first headlining tour in a while, right?
Yeah, I took off. So 2021, December, like mid-December 2021 was the last tour date that I did with Struggle Jennings, and we had co-headlined it across the U.S. And before that, I actually did the first national headlining tour in the world before COVID, while COVID was still at the tail end of it. And then I was supposed to go out in 2022, and I had a vocal cord injury. So my tour got canceled about a week before we went out.
Do you think that was because you took time away from music and performing, that like the muscle wasn't worked or whatever?
No, I think that it was like a stress induced, right? Mm-hmm. It was like pushing too hard, and also being like fatigued and tired. And, sometimes your body is telling you, like, again, I was doing 200 shows a year from 2018 on, up until the pandemic hit. Yeah. And then when the pandemic hit, I went in and I recorded, how many albums? So I recorded 2 cover albums. I recorded, the original name of the Bad Wolves' third record was called Signs of the Apocalypse. They changed the vocals and turned it into Dear Monsters, but I wrote and recorded 90% of that record. I recorded Grand Theft Audio, which turned into be my first debut solo record, and actually half of my new record, Antarctica, was originally tracked during COVID. So it was 5 albums worth of work that I did.
In a pretty short period of time.
Yeah. Well,
and then you were still doing music with other people too, because you were just on tour with El Nino.
Yeah. Right? So I came out of retirement for El Nino. So I was sort of not really, I was kind of just, my dad had died. My dad had died of pancreatic cancer in July. And then after the funeral, literally Dave called me that day and was like, hey, I have an emergency. I need your help. And I was like, yeah, what do you, whatever. He's like, I need you to come sing this tour. And I was like, obviously grief stricken. And I just was like, probably be good to go on stage and take some of this sad energy and like put it out there. And we went to Europe. We had 4 days of rehearsal. I had to learn 14 songs. So the first 3 shows we were in Poland and Slovenia, and I had cue cards with the lyrics. And I'm a fan of El Nino. I've known them for 25 years. I grew up listening to them, but it's a different, learning the lyrics of all the words of all those songs. But it was great, and we had such an amazing time. And I love the dynamic of those guys. They're like a big family. Yeah. Nobody does drugs. Nobody parties. Like, obviously I'm 15 years sober. A lot of people know that. And so, it just made me fall back in love with being on the road. And I was like, oh, maybe I still want to do this. And so here we are now. And
Sure.
Yeah.
There is kind of a lot of substitutions, it seems like, in the rock world of like somebody gets sick or somebody's busy with this thing. There's people in multiple bands because you fronted like a good number of bands.
Well, like this is the thing, like despite whatever controversy is about me, number one, people know that if they hire me, I'm going to get the job done.
Yeah.
And I show up sober. I have a good work ethic and, I'm pretty easy to get along with. The people who don't get along with me usually are don't align with a sober lifestyle. And so having somebody around who's sober, and this is something that I didn't realize till I got a little more clarity, like having conversations with members of bands from the past, is that I don't realize that just by me being clean, people who are doing cocaine and excessively drinking or taking pills or whatever I make them uncomfortable.
You make them look bad.
Well, what they have.
I know what you mean.
I've had ex-band members who have gotten sober and come back and be like, I was a dick to you, or like I always thought you were judging me, and I was like, dude, like I prayed for you.
Yeah.
And so I never. It didn't occur to me until some of those amends were made toward me that I was like, oh, like I never even considered that.
Yeah.
So like I think that was a very big lesson of like I kind of have to be around people who are like that, and as a hired gun it's a different story, right? So I'm just showing up and doing a job,
sure, but
like when it comes to collaborating with people and creating and actually doing projects, like I find that it's much more beneficial that if I'm in an environment that's conducive to people who want to be into fitness and they want to, like don't want to do drugs and they want to go to bed at a reasonable hour and they, like over rehearsing and stuff. Yeah. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I think, what's the saying? It's like you're most like the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think you naturally end up being like that. So if you're sober and nobody else is, and if you're the one who's going and talking to all the fans and people are seeing you succeed on social media and all these other things, they compare themselves to you and they're like, well, I'm not achieving those things. I'm not getting those things.
Yeah.
And I think that makes people uncomfortable because they feel inadequate in some capacity anyways, because they're not able to do those things yet.
And that was expressed to me in one of my former band members who, in the big band that I was in, that, I didn't want to go to the dressing room or the bus because it was an unsafe place for me. Yeah. So I wound up spending all my time out with the fans. And I was actually directed by my sponsor in recovery, was like, if you feel uncomfortable in your space, don't try to force everybody to change. Go out and be of service to the people.
Right.
And that kind of amassed me like a large social media following, just because like wherever energy goes, attention flows.
Yeah,
so the more energy you give your audience, like it sort of proliferates into the digital multiverse, whatever you want to call it. And so, it's just an interesting thing to like,
Well, I think to build like real fans, like core fans, it isn't like you have things go viral and then people follow you or whatever. But I've heard from a lot of music artists that it's all the people that you meet one-on-one every night that you're doing 200 shows a night. Well, if you're meeting 200 people every single night, that's whatever 4,000 people, whatever the math is. You're meeting a lot of people that then become core fans that are interacting with your social media, which is helping everything else grow as well. It's like all that stuff's 100%. Really tied together.
Well, and it's a little like I was doing that in arenas, right? Zombie came out. We had the #1 song. We had the biggest song that our label had released in I think like 16 years or 17 years or something.
Yeah.
And it was a mainstream intergenerational global success.
Yeah.
And I'm like, like there he's at the merch booth. Like it's like if Gwen Stefani would just pop up at a merch booth when Just a Girl came out.
Yeah.
And so, but it didn't really. I come from CBGBs, like the hardcore punk scene, like the keeping it real, like and like gangster rap, and like I grew up in the New York City like music culture, and everything was about keeping it real. And so it never occurred to me that what I was doing was weird.
Sure.
And I had like other singers be like, "Yo, how could you talk to all these people all night and not lose your voice?" And I was like, "I don't. I listen to them."
Yeah.
Most of the people who I met, because I talk about, obviously, well, it's not obvious for anyone who doesn't know. I Remember When is a song about my twin brother who almost murdered me while he was on drugs, violently during a home invasion. I have songs about my sobriety, like Sober went #1. I am very open about anti-suicide messaging. I'm an attempted suicide survivor. I talk about the family disease of alcoholism, as I used to be a counselor. And so as a songwriter, I just wrote my life. And then there were many times where I was like, I don't know if I should say this. I remember I took my mom and my sister out to dinner when Remember When it was already recorded and written. And then Wayne Isham heard the story and said, I want to make this into a mini movie for the music video. And obviously he did Zombie. He's worked with Michael Jackson. He did, Pantera, Metallica, Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears. So it's not something you could say no to. And I remember sitting with my mom. We were on Restaurant Row by Times Square, and I was like, why are we going to dinner? I was like, I was like, I need to talk to you about this because it's not my story. It's like our story. Our whole family went through this together, and I need your permission before I can say it's okay to do this. And my mom, being the good Al-Anon that she is, she said, if our family story, if the pain that we went through helps one person, then it was worth it. And part of the reason why I am the way that I am is because of her, right? And so, I got blessed with two very, my parents learned the hard way, and they fucked up, but it's the retrospect that they offer, and she gave me permission. And so then that song was the #1 most selling song on Billboard in 2019 of the entire genre of rock. And for me, I'm like, dude, we're going against Five Finger Death Punch, Shinedown,
sure,
Papa Roach, Breaking Benjamin, Nothing More, Falling in Reverse, like these massive bands. And is the song the greatest written song? Like, I don't know if it's the song, but the message is...
It's powerful, dude. I showed that song to my girlfriend yesterday. I was listening to my earbuds while we're sitting next to each other on the couch, and she went to go show me a meme on her phone, and I looked at her and I pulled my earbud out and I was choke it up. I'm sorry. I got you don't... And I told her the story of it. And I'm not one to really cry, but that message is extremely powerful, and it's a very vulnerable thing to put out there. Like you said, not just for yourself, but for your whole family.
Yeah. Well, and then what happens is that anyone who has what I've come to find out, and when I listen to people, most of the fans come and they're like, I need to thank you for writing this song. And then they tell me their story. And I think before I had the courage to be this transparent about the trauma and the past and the addiction and all the bad things that I had experienced, I felt terminally unique. And having courage to tell the truth, what it does is that you get a mirror from the public, and all of a sudden I'm not alone.
Right.
And in a reverse way, I wrote a song to try to tell the truth, to help other people heal. But by making myself available to their stories, I healed.
Yeah.
And that's literally what music's supposed to do, right? It's the cycle. And so that did more for me than 10 years of therapy.
Yeah. Just
to know that so many people have gone through this.
Yeah. Well, I think we're always trying to fit in when we're growing up, right?
Yeah.
So we try to do whatever we think most people will like us for, and being open about those types of things. And in general, finding your true community that connects with you on a deeper level is going to be about your unique story that not the majority of the people on the world are not going to relate to it. And that's not the point, is to get the majority of the people. It's to find the people that do actually relate to it. But it's hard to switch your mindset and put yourself in a vulnerable position where you're no longer trying to appease everybody. You know what I mean? Because you're going to have a lot of people that judge you.
It's a roll of the dice. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? Because what if they don't like,
Yeah.
What if that, I've had lots of thoughts and opinions that have people like, I don't agree with you. Huh? So it's just, you have to just be who you are.
Yeah.
You just have to just dump it on the table for better or for worse, and let, that's what being an artist is. And then you let your people who come to it pick out what they like and what they don't like. And, it's an interesting process.
Let's get to our first song.
Sure.
What's one song you want to play right now? Should we do stuff off of your newest project, which is what, Antarctica?
Yeah, well, that's my second solo album. Well, it's technically my fourth,
but that's your
it's
most
originals.
Recent.
Yeah. So there's let's play. Let's do Father and Son. So this is a song that I wrote for my father. My father had alcoholism. I just had mentioned earlier, he passed away in July. He did die with 7 years sober, and we got to fix our relationship before he died. And I actually got to hold him in my arms when he took his last breaths. And it was that's the miracle of sobriety, right? Like that I number one, that I could be the kind of person that would show up and not make it about me and get totally plastered and ruin everything with my disease. Not only that I could show up and ask what is needed of me, but that he could communicate to me what was necessary, and that we could literally, like I came into the world and then he went out of the world, and and so I wrote this song in 2020, and I'm glad that he got to hear it. And this is for and this is another thing for all the men out there who have issues with their dads, or if you're not talking to your dad and he's alive, and maybe give him a call. Or even if you have a stepfather or an adopted father, or any men, we need other men, and it's okay to say that. And I think that that's like, there's some weird tough guy stigma that we're supposed to like handle it on our own, and to a degree, yes, society functions better for us when we are responsible, but we need each other, and it's okay to say, hey, I'm sorry. Yeah.
You said, repairing the relationship with your father. Do you think you needed to be able to forgive yourself before you could get to a place where you could forgive others when part of that sobriety kind of journey?
No, in sobriety, there's 12 steps, right? And so, I mean, all addicts and alcoholics, we have a sort of twisted narcissistic self-destruction, which is why things get to the place that they do. So it wasn't necessarily, I didn't go into the process of making amends thinking that I was first, right? It didn't even occur to me, because, the men in the rooms and my sponsor and my support system they assisted me in giving me examples that where I had actually played a role in every single thing that I had a resentment against. And even things that happened to me as a child that I was innocent and couldn't control. As a man, I had used those as an excuse to be shitty to other people.
Right.
And then I would wonder why people would react to me the way that I was. You know what I mean? Because don't you know that this happened to me?
Right.
And so that's when I talk about extreme accountability and extreme personal responsibility, it goes to that first. And so the process starts where now I have to go make amends to all these people I'd harmed. Like if I owed people money, I had to pay, I remember being new 15 years ago and I'm like, I don't want to get paid my money. And they're like, it's their money. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
So you start, unfortunately, I'm 42 years old when I had to learn how to grow up at 27. So I was a late bloomer. And then I think that many years later, one of the first defining self-forgiveness things was I had lost my son. My son died. And I blamed myself. And I had to get sober because after he passed, I used his death as an excuse to just go off the rails and try to kill myself. But I was too much of a coward to just end it. So I tried to use drugs and alcohol. And so that led to some overdoses. And then finally I got the gift of desperation and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I became willing and I went to a meeting. And, but I still believe that if I would have done something different, even though there was nothing, it was completely out of my power.
Right.
And it took about to my 5th year of sobriety to, and I remember I was in New York City at a meeting called NYU, and the speaker was talking about losing their child.
Yeah.
And they said all these things, and I was like, I just like, like the tears, and I'm just like, oh my God, like it's not my fault. Like we don't realize grief will kill you. And so we don't realize how long we hold on to grief and how long we punish ourselves for things that the coulda, woulda, shouldas, and that also will steer us into self-victimization. So, I had to allow myself, it's like, you have to be okay with there were circumstances beyond your control. Sometimes there were circumstances that are not beyond our control, but if we have to allow ourselves grace. And what I realize is that if I don't allow myself grace, I don't have grace for anyone else.
Right. Yeah, that's one lesson that I've been trying to, and I guess I've said on the show a few times, is something I've been working on is just being kind to myself in retrospect of like, I'm not saying I made the best decision with this thing or whatever. I'm not saying that I wasn't in the wrong in this situation, but I did genuinely do the best I could with what I had in that moment based on where I was in my life. Could I do better if I went back and could make that decision? Maybe, but like that already happened. And I know that I wasn't being lazy. I wasn't intentionally trying to hurt people or whatever. I was doing the best that I can. And I think that's the case with the majority of people.
Yeah.
Like whenever we look and we villainize people and we think, oh, they're horrible because of this, I would never do that. I genuinely think the vast majority of people have good hearts and are good people and are just trying to do the best that they can with what they have in the situation that they're in.
I mean, I agree. And I think people struggle. Another reason why I find cancel culture absurd is because, the whole premise is like people will go back 20 years and find something you said or something you did when you were a completely different person.
Yeah.
Right. On a cellular level, every 7 years, like in 7 years from now, you will completely be a completely brand new person.
I'll be buff like you.
Yeah. No. Well, you got to go to the gym and work. You gotta push some weight around for that.
Yeah.
But so this idea that anybody who has lived a perfect life is absurd, right? It's like Christians only believe that Christ lived a perfect life, but then I see people who claim to be Christians and then condemn people who are in the struggle stage.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not the way. The way is the way is to have compassion and boundaries, but it's not to, because it's also self-condemnation, right? Like if I believe in God and a spiritual creator of the universe that loves me, well, part of loving me unconditionally is God forgives me. So I'm busy shaming and beating myself up, but I've already been forgiven. And then if I'm busy shaming and beating myself up, you'll see that I'll start shaming him because we project the worst parts of ourselves onto other people to make ourselves feel better. It's a strange psychological human behavioral pattern that like has become socially acceptable. And I would like to see that sort of dissipate over the next, again, with the internet, there's so much access to so much stuff.
Yeah.
And it turns into like all like gotcha moments. And the thing about being human is we're flawed.
Right.
Where we can't learn without making mistakes. And if everyone can't make a mistake, you can't grow, and then you can't become the person that you're meant to be. I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for all the terrible things that had happened in my past, the mistakes that I've made. There's a saying, it's like this guy I follow said, he's like, he's an ex-military guy, and he said, my wife and children will never understand the amount of violence it took to become this much of a peaceful man. They will never see that from me. They will never know that, you know what I mean? Because the horrors that I had to face during his time of service,
yeah.
And I mean, that that kind of says it all. We're going to have to go through these things that are uncomfortable and ugly in us and painful and traumatic in order to produce the circle that I talked about the song, right? About having a message and then committing to being different and understanding that when you see someone else suffering, being able to relate to them and say, hey, like, there's another way to do this, right? And that's as we as gentlemen get older, our role in society becomes to take the place of the men who came before us.
Right. Well, I think it's just, it's so easy these days to give a very small version of a story that could be good or bad, right? All these people that are made out to be perfect are certainly not perfect people. All these people who are made out to be horrible are not as horrible as people make them out to be the vast majority of the time. You're just seeing one snapshot of whatever rhetoric that is. It's the same way of like, if you talk to somebody who you had a bad breakup, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or whatever, if you go talk to exclusively ex-girlfriends of mine, I probably don't sound as nice as I do if you talk to kids that I inspired in my skateboard shop. Yeah, like people tell a totally different story.
Well, and I went through a breakup recently, and I'm an ex who's really struggling, and we had a beautiful relationship, and some things happened, and she really took a left turn, and it became not only unmanageable but impossible to stay in the relationship for me because of my own boundaries, and it's interesting because we spoke earlier today because she's been basically living at my home, and she has to leave on Monday, and she, it's like she wanted to tell me all the things I did wrong.
Sure.
And I'm in a place now where I'm like, okay, like, I want to help you with your closure. And that's an extension of the she's like, and you didn't love me unconditionally. And I'm like, I'm sorry that you felt that way.
Right.
And I sat there and I realized, I'm like, I'm still loving you unconditionally.
Right now.
Yeah. And I don't have to say it. And even though it hurts that the love is over and that I couldn't control the situation, I'm like, I get to walk away from that situation, and I'm probably the best person that she's ever been with.
Sure.
And she said that she's like, one day I'm going to, be married with, this or the other, and I'm going to call you, and, I'm going to tell you how good it is, and that, for a year and a half, you took me out of a hole and you built me, and like, I made it impossible to stay, but thank you for loving me. And I'm like, so I did love you unconditionally. So
yeah,
and it's hard, bro. It's hard when you want something to work and you have to like actually observe that it can't work and then not get resentful.
Yeah, but I think that's a lot more than just relationships. I think that's life in general. Some things work better for whatever reason. You could call it a higher power or whatever. But I think that sometimes you do have to put yourself in a difficult position to be uncomfortable, to grow, and in that kind of way. But I do, this is weird to relate it back to skateboarding, but I always do because like I own a skate shop. That's like my industry. Some tricks just seem to work better for some people. And I always push kids to like, you don't have to learn 360 flips just because that's the cool one. Do whatever feels good and works for you. Our lives are not supposed to be the same, right? So you're supposed to do whatever feels right. Like I really believe your gut feeling is right 100% of the time. And when it's wrong, you're supposed to make that mistake and then you can learn from that mistake, right? But whatever feels right in that moment is what you should be doing. And what may feel right if you guys were on a different timeline just isn't right for this particular moment. And that's okay.
Well, so skateboarding and a few other sports like that, and I think it relates to music. I think this is why they're so coordinated, is like there's a spiritual relationship with physics, right? Because interpersonally inside of you, to manipulate the physics of the action of what you're doing in motion, you have to be aligned and committed to the trick.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing with singing a certain note, playing a difficult drum beat, ripping the right solo. There has to be an internal spiritual connection with the weapon, right? And an execution that relies on inside of yourself. And each one of us have a different blueprint of what we're going to be special at doing. And it's like being young is trying to figure out what your blueprint is in your lane, right? That's the hard part.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part that we don't give kids enough credit for, is that they don't have an identity yet, because they don't know what they're good at. They don't know what they want yet. So there's a lot of experimentation, which sometimes is drugs and going down unfortunate paths. But in general, like, it's just experimenting with life, and what you are good at and what you want to be doing for one decade of your life can be drastically different from another decade of your life.
That's never happened to me.
No?
No, I've been singing in bands since I was 13 years old.
Sure.
I actually, it was, as a child, it was always strange to me that my friends didn't know what they wanted to be. I always was like, that's so weird. Like, I'm like, there's only one thing, like I would go see Pantera or Machine Head or Fear Factory or Marilyn Manson. And I'm like, and I would have this experience of the people who go to church and shake, and I was like, this is it. This is the sign, Yeah. And then you try to get there and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, people said, oh, Bad Wolves, overnight sensation. Dude, me and Doc and John were like 36, 38, and 40 when we went platinum.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, well, it's a culmination of a bunch of hard work and putting yourself in the right positions, and eventually something catches on, and that's what everybody sees.
Well, it's last man standing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The music industry is a royal rumble for notoriety, attention, execution, prestige, and you just have to last, because people will quit.
Yeah,
they
that's
will
okay
quit.
For a lot of things, though, not just music.
Yeah. I mean, most entrepreneurial ventures are like that.
Totally,
it's last man standing.
Yeah, look at podcasts. Joe Rogan was doing it for a long time before anyone really cared.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I think in the same way with me, I think I'm on a little over 5 years. It took quite a while before the show was at a point where I was like, I'm pretty proud of this, and I understand why clips are doing well on the internet now. This was you was doing it long.
You ask you because I obviously like looked at your Instagram and went through and skimmed, and I was like, man, this guy is creating an environment for the guests to talk about things that matter, right? And I've seen lots of podcasts and I've been on podcasts where the podcast is there to serve the interviewer's ego, instead of to create a conversation. Right. And so you're doing that really well. And so don't stop. Yeah, no, but that's what's cool about it. It's like having that mindset of creating a platform that serves others instead of serving ourselves. So when you were like, oh, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And then you're like, I got to drive 2 hours. I'm like, that's a really long drive. Like, but you made it.
Dude, I got to bring my best friend and we get to hang out for a show.
Yeah.
I was like, absolutely. Like, I'm definitely down. So let's get to our next song break. What's another song that we can play? Maybe one that you might play for us tonight.
Yeah, what can we do? Smoking Gun. Yeah, that's a good one. This song, I shot a music video for. It's out on YouTube now. It's the last video we put out, and it features Allie Harding, who's like she's like a TikTok. She's not an influencer. She's like an inspirational, motivational speaker.
Okay.
Had a crazy life story. We got to talking. I was like, do you want to be a female Dexter in a music video? And so she's sort of like, it's a mixture of Dexter meets Hard Candy, where like she goes out on a date, the guy tries to roofie her, but he doesn't realize she's a serial killer.
Sure.
So I'm not going to give up the rest, but you watch the video and it's brutal,
Yeah, if you go to your page, it's the one that's featured on the top that automatically plays. You go to your page. So go check it out.
Your YouTube crushes.
It's okay.
Dude, it's really good. Your music,
thanks.
all the music videos and stuff that you have on there, like if you look at, and I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for it, but if you look at like Spotify numbers, like everyone's on all these different platforms. Mm-hmm. But your YouTube in particular, like all your covers and everything, the visuals, everything to it is awesome. And they get a lot of views. Like a lot of those cover songs, most of those videos seem to have 1 million plus.
Yeah. I mean, well, thanks for that perspective, because I look at my YouTube as a failure. Right?
Why is that?
Well, because in Bad Wolves, Zombie has 550 million views.
Sure.
Hear Me Now has 100 million. Remember When is something like, I think 70 million now. Even a song like No Masters is between 10 and 20, like Killing Me Slowly, Sober, like these video, like came from a band where, and again, like I was a primary songwriter for all of our hit songs.
Yeah.
The guys in the band, they didn't play on a lot of those songs. And so, there's a thing of when you get removed from the machine and you're like, it's not going to hit the same. I don't have the same level of exposure. I'm not on a big label. Like I don't have a whole team working for me. So it's interesting because like even Take Me to Church, which is at like, I think 4 million views now or something. It might be up to 5. That was just in Nashville. And my friend Austin and my old drummer, Levine, they just put 2 cameras on me in a studio and I just sang the thing like 3 or 4 times with 2 different angles and they just chopped it up. And that's the weird thing, like that clip came out on, so I started a TikTok about 2 years ago. My Instagram was deleted and I went with 500,000 views, 500,000 followers. So I was like, I'll just switch to TikTok because I'm getting crushed on Metaverse. Like I got 250,000 on Facebook. No one could see my posts. Like the shadow banning is crazy. I started posting on TikTok. That song got like 3 million views in like a day. And then I looked and I made $56,000 on iTunes and downloads.
Oh God.
And I was like, I remember calling like my old sound guy and I was like, bro, we're back in business, baby. Like, so if you own the masters of your recordings, you can really make money.
Yeah.
You can make real money. It's just that I was so used to having, 500 million streams, hundreds of millions of streams, and like making like,
sure.
But it's because I didn't own my masters. It was because I wasn't, you're in debt to a label, so the label has to get paid back first. And so there were all these things. And then with my former band's YouTube channel, we didn't own our page.
Oh.
So when we signed a contract, I was very green, and they included that all the music videos would officially have to come out on the label's YouTube page.
Okay.
So Zombie, the video on the YouTube page, even though I donated all of my royalties to Dolores' family, everybody was making money off that song. So I'm sure the song did something like $10 million
Sure.
in AdSense revenue up to now. But we, again, like a lot of bands, when you're signed to a label, you don't see that. That's not your money.
But I think that's what's important when you look at your YouTube channel, where it's like, you got to look at, for one, what's the saying? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? But like when you get on a major label and you're working with a whole bunch of people, then who you're comparing yourself to is Five Finger Death Punch or Falling in Reverse or all these other bands that are in a similar position.
But I sang for that band, so like it's a listen, going from a major label with that kind of machine behind you and then the fall to independent, you don't really fall back to where you were, but you notice a difference.
Right.
There's a massive difference, and it's a good lesson. Like I have a different appreciation for the people at my label and the amount of, like, having run my own label alone, right, with one other employee, the amount of work that these people do is incredible.
Yeah.
And the effectiveness and the relationship, these people have relationships they've been building for 20 or 30 years of their career. And the machine is a machine because all the pieces fit and it's like, and it goes. And so, for all the downsides of it, there's an equal balance, right? Like, so it's like the devil or the devil you don't know, right?
Yeah. But again, like you're comparing yourself to these people, which you're friends with, and I'm not saying you're on a different level. What I'm saying is when you then go independent, the stuff that you're putting out just by yourself, it's hard to compare then to what a band has with the label and everything. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're not comparing to Jacoby putting out his own thing that he set up a camera and singing. You know what I mean? It's just a totally different kind of comparison.
Well, I will say financially, so this is the other discrepancy, is like you get 100 million views on a label versus 10 million views without a label. The money I make is here.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's a weird thing where some haters will be like, "Oh, look, like you're not doing," and I'm like, I'm making more money than I've ever made in my entire life, by being alone. but I have no promotion and I have no help. And it's like, I'm 24/7, like, I'm on social media, I'm answering calls, I'm like getting yelled at by this person, the promoter, these people need this. And I'm like, what? So I don't know. I think I don't really have it. Like, I don't really know what, like, I don't have advice to give artists on which way is right or wrong. I just know that I've done it this way and I've done it that way, right? People like Tom McDonald does it independently and he really makes it work. Yeah. People like Peyton Parrish, independent, they really make it work, right? And it helps that he has a manager, and his manager is a family member who's pretty much a genius.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So they're able to compensate by building an independent crew that would replace what a label would do. But you're still going to have drawbacks because a lot of times in the music industry, it is very cliquey and you're paying for relationships. Yeah. So you're taking financial hits for, you got to look at your streaming as a stock.
Yeah.
A lot of times people get scared when their stock goes down and they want to sell and they want to pull out. But, the way that streaming is that if you build a catalog up, if you put out, 15 records over 20 years, when you sell that, I don't know anybody else that can make $8 million selling their publishing in 4 years, 5 years.
Sure.
But that's what's available now.
Yeah. Well,
that's a new model.
A lot of it is just depending on like what you want. Some people specifically want to have the most streams, become the most famous rock star in the world, and that's like what somebody's working towards or whatever. But I think it just depends. Like sometimes it's okay if your goals are, for me as an example, my goal and where I'm at right now is sustainably doing what I want and having creative control of that.
Yeah.
And if I made more money, sweet. If I got flown out to go do stuff at Lollapalooza, that'd be fun. Like I'm down. But right now what I'm doing, it is a lot of work, but I have complete control over all of it and it's sustainable and I'm happy. And that's all that really matters for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's two worlds, right? Like sustainability. I guess it's like they say in alcoholism, like with alcoholism, you can't turn a pickle back into a cucumber. Once you've been to the big show,
sure,
you're a pickle. You could put me back with the cucumbers, but I'm a pickle.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? That's how it feels. And so you just like, it's opportunities to grow in humility and acceptance and understanding. But I also see the treachery of like people who suffer from fame addiction, right? My buddy says this quote, fame is the only drug that makes you sick before you get it, right? And I've been at the top of my game, and I've had people just so spiritually sick to be around, who just want to be around, or girls who will just throw themselves at someone because they're famous, or dudes who will just, people who will do anything to just try to be famous. And it's like, it's a false sense of validation. And it's rooted, I believe, in spiritual bankruptcy, right? So the Bad Wolf song "No Messiah" is not about there not being a Messiah. It's about I'm no Messiah, right? Like I'm not curing cancer. I'm not out here saving the world's problems. My job is to tell the truth, and in doing so, I give people 45 minutes to an hour and a half every night where they get to forget about their problems and know that they're not alone. That's it. That's all. That's my job. I'm not better than anybody else. I'm not more. I'm not less. Like I'm just being happy as a hippo. And I learned this lesson because I was a sober coach for Justin Bieber, and I lived with him and I went to church with him and I went and did things with him, and I observed, when he was struggling with some of his substance stuff, the faulty delusional thinking that resulted as from the exposure of being so young and undeveloped and being thrust into massive mega celebrity.
Yeah.
Right? And how there's a delusion that comes with that. And if, as a man, again, grateful I didn't get like famous, right? I didn't get my 15 seconds until I was an adult. I was a fully formed adult man with 10 years sober and had lived a life and had worked all the jobs and done all the things, and, you know, and so, and even then it was very difficult to go to, like, you know, grocery store, the gym, a laundromat, the hotel. I mean, I remember I dated this girl in Australia, and I went to go see her, and we went to a hotel, and the lady at the front desk freaked out.
Sure.
And I'm like, I've never even been here, you know what I mean? And so I don't think, and I think that I can't imagine being a child.
Right.
And all of a sudden that happens to you.
Yeah.
And the delusion, and that I've met a lot of very famous people who are miserable.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like,
well, there's a lot of pressure on them. I feel like that's got to be something that contributes to it quite a bit. Yeah,
I mean, I was a lot of my experience in Bad Wolves was absolutely miserable. Whether you want to say I was in the wrong camp or I had the wrong people around me, whichever the version is, because obviously my version was this and their version is that, and I respect both. But it wasn't aligned, right? We were not aligned in our you know, it's not like a lot of people think that the band literally broke up only over politics. Our lifestyles were not aligned.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like Chris Rock talks about, he's like, you got to do what, you know, if you're in no marriage, you got to do the same. He's like, you can't be going to church and you're like, baby, where you going? I'm going to smoke crack. You know, It's two completely different lifestyles.
Yeah. Well, again, like ideally, I remember hearing a quote from you saying something like, I'm a poser. I surround myself with geniuses. That's not the exact quote, but you said something along the lines of like, I want to surround myself by people who are great because I'm not yet. Right. And it's like, that's, if you're surrounding yourself with people that aren't the people that, like, you don't want to be like them necessarily. It's fine that they are who they are, but that's not the type of person that you want to be. Then you're not helping yourself get to where you want to go. So you're just, and that doesn't mean what they're doing is wrong or whatever. It's just different.
Well, everybody wants different things, right? So like, I became friends with Andy Frisella, right? He owns First Form Fitness. He has his Real MF podcast, one of the biggest podcasts in the country. Dude has a mansion just for his cars. He's the most humble motherfucker in the world, and he's a badass. But like, we clicked, and you know, and I was like, dude, I want like, this is what I want to be like. And I'm like, can I shadow you? Like, I've gone there. I'm like, can I just watch you work? Like, same thing with Zoltan from Five Finger Death Punch. I'm like, how does your brain work? Like, we went on tour all over the world together we did like 7 tours together, right? And so I'm like, hey, let's go eat. And he would most successful, intelligent people, if you ask them how do they win, they'll tell you, right? Like when I was doing my band Vext in New York 10 years ago, and I knew David Draymond. I was like, hey, look, here are these songs. What do you think? He's like, you need to do this, and do this. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I've never been a hater, right? I'm not at this. I don't actually understand that, because I always look at things as like, someone explained it to me that, you know, I'm like, why would you help me? And like, it's just one homeless guy showing another homeless guy where the bread is, right? And you can't, and like, I think a lot of people who are in abundance, they understand that they can't keep what they can't keep it if they don't give some of it away to somebody.
Right.
And so the most valuable thing a successful person can offer another person is the map.
Right. Well, it's that scarcity mindset that a lot of people have. And I'm very much of the belief of like, your shine doesn't take away from my shine. If you're successful, however, on whatever scale of success, all that means is I have somebody on my team that is more successful day to day. Like 100%. I don't, if you, whatever you succeed in doesn't make me succeed in my lane less, because we're in different lanes, we're doing different things. And that's honestly like a selfish reason this show.
Even if we're in the same lane.
Yeah.
Right?
But there's more than enough to go around.
Well, say I'm a boxer and it's 1989 and I'm friends with Mike Tyson. Do you think I want him to lose? No, man. Right. Like, win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Win. I'm from the like Entourage era. Well, you know, it's like I want to see my people win. I want everyone to win.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't understand that. So like when I go to the gym in Vegas, I go to the Dragon's Lair and I hang out with Flex Lewis, and Flex won Olympia like 7 times, and I train with Justin Dees, and you know, when I'm wherever I'm at, you know, like I just was in Dallas, so I worked out with Steve Kuklo, and you know, I want to be with the people who are better than me.
Right.
Right? Because like on the basketball court as a kid, if you play with the chumps, you stay a chump.
Right.
If you play with the big dogs, even if you can hang, when you go back to the chump board, you're dunking on everybody,
right.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, and I think we're made to grow. I think we're supposed to get better at things as
Absolutely.
we get older, you know?
Yeah.
So I have like, you know, my friend John Chiarondo is, you know, he's like one of the most anonymous, like success. This guy is the most successful, but he's also the most humble, doesn't have a social media imprint. All he does is spend all of his extra time that's not directly on his family helping other people.
Sure.
Like, I'm like, how are you awake? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how I got involved with the Down Syndrome Foundation.
Yeah.
Was through him. I got invited to an event in I think 2016, and I fell in love with these kids.
And that was before you made the music video?
Yeah, long
Yeah,
before.
okay.
So I had been affiliated with it for years. So I think we did the video in 2022, and you know, the War You Wanted music video is like, it's for all intents and purposes, it's an anti-bullying campaign.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the main character is a wrestler. He's a real wrestler. His name's Triple V, is his wrestling name, Vincent. Sure. And the way that he kind of came into everyone's sphere is, Vincent's story is so miraculous, man. This guy, you know, he has Down syndrome. He knows everything about every wrestler, about like an encyclopedia. And his sister was roofied with fentanyl on a date. She was drugged on a date, and she had like an aneurysm and had brain damage and became paralyzed. And so Vincent wrote a letter to the foundation asking if he could do a wrestling match to raise $1 million to buy a house. Like, bro, these people are the nicest people. And you look at them and how they think, and you're like, why are we not more like this? He wanted to make a house for his sister to have wheelchair access. So John got a hold of this letter. He called Charlie Rocket at the Dream Foundation. They hit up me, Tommy Davidson, you know, from the comedian, and then all these people came together, and then Mojo, Raleigh, and like Braun Strowman, and all these WWE wrestlers, everyone showed up, everyone volunteered, and we had a huge event, and we raised $1 million to buy this family a house so his sister could have, you know, access to a wheelchair, and then John gave him a job at one of his offices.
Wow. Working
at the office. And so in the music video, the actual event took place before, right?
Sure.
And so he wanted his own song, and I was like, I got a song for you, dude, like for his wrestling career. Yeah. And so Auguste Artois played the villain, and we basically reverse engineered the music video. And we used one of the factories that was like, they let us shoot in this factory, and we made this whole narrative of him going to work, and this guy's a dick and he's bullying him, and then he like gets trained, and then he beats up the bully and then hugs him at the end and is like, you're cool, bro. Like, yeah. You know what I mean? And to me, that's like, that encapsulates like so much of wrestling and metal and the anti-bullying messages and the Down Syndrome Foundation and like all these people who just came and did this for free.
Yeah.
You know, just because it was the right thing to do.
Because he inspired them.
Yeah, and that's like, but that's the powerful thing is like, right. You know, a lot of people, it's like, it's not about how much money you have or how smart you are or how strong you are, how this, any person with goodness in their heart has the power to inspire millions of people.
Absolutely.
Just by being good. And that's something that I think because of social media, because of legacy media, because of the nastiness of the sort of divide and conquer, I feel like the 1%ers they're the most highly invested in dividing people, that we lose stories like this.
Yeah.
Right? These are the things that we miss track of that put us back in touch with our own humanity. And like, that's what I want to be a part of. That's what I want to be attached to. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I did the political stuff. I did I've worn many hats, you know. I've been in the fitness space. I've been in the tattoo space. I've been, you know, I did all these things. I'm like, I want to be where I want to be part of things and campaigns and stuff that are bringing everyone back to the center, because I don't want to lose our humanity.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want the collective human consciousness to be under a false belief that the most threatening thing to us is the guy next door.
Right.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
So,
dude.
Anyway, that was a long spiel. Sorry.
Yeah. Powerful message though, and it answered the question that I usually ask at the end. So there's no need to even ask it, and we can get to pizza if that's up for your.
Let's eat pizza.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to see this show. Live music. I feel like I didn't go to that much live music before I started doing the show, and then once I started doing this, I realized how awesome rock music is live.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's incredible. So this is going to be really fun. Where can people go follow you and get in contact if they wanted to ask for more spiels of their own from you?
Yeah,
how do they get in touch?
I'm on TikTok. Tommy is Vext. I'm on Instagram at Tommy Vext. I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. Tommy Vext Official. You can go to TommyVextOfficial.com to see, you know, concert tickets, music videos, all the things,
including the one we just talked about.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.